Today we're looking at 3 list ideas for the Imperial Guard in 9th edition to adapt our forces to the coming changes. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the tabletop. In today's video we're just going to have 3 overviews of 3 different lists for the Imperial Guard, all aimed for the 2000 points Eternal War missions. Just trying to talk about a few archetypes of Guard army list and how they might fare in the new edition. I take these lists as more sort of a springboard for ideas rather than the absolute finished article. We're trying to explore a few themes as to where we could go with the Guard, with some real examples that are actually measured out in terms of points. As always, if you can spot any efficiency improvements or small mistakes in the list, then please let me know. But in any case, let's jump straight into it. First we'll take a look at some Cadian and Balgrins, then we'll look at a Foot Guard list, then we'll take a look at an army that's putting a lot of vehicles on the table. So first of all, let's take a look at a good old-fashioned Balgrin Murder Death Star, screening out for an absolute ton of murderous Guard firepower. This one's a single Cadian battalion allowing for maximum command points, which I would use to make the Emperor's Fist tank company to gain access to the Hammer of Sunderance. The Balgrin Star itself has 9 models in it, each armed with a slab shield and a Balgrin maul. The models only went up 1 point from 8th to 9th edition, which is a lot less than most things in the game did, giving them a relative buff. Having thought about the list a little bit more since I wrote this down though, I will be tempted to drop a couple of the plasma guns from the infantry squads to put a couple of brute shields on the Balgrin, just for tanking anything that's got excessively high AP. In general though, these slab shields should do pretty fine. We'll have 2 astropaths nearby them to cast Psychic Barrier and Night Shroud on them, so they'll be -1 to hit and have +1 to their already 2+ save, and we can further use Take Cover on them to get those saves even higher. The squad also has a Minister and Priest in tow to give all the Balgrins 1 extra attack in close combat, and we'll be running around a Psychic Maelstrom astropath as well, just to throw out some mortal wounds. In general, this squad will be just dominating the centre of the board and giving the opponent a tricky decision as to whether or not they want to come close to try and lock up your tanks and risk the charge from the Balgrin. Moving up alongside them will be 6 infantry squads, each with a bolter and plasma gun. Bolters cost 2 points on the sergeant, so a little bit more of a decision than before, but I think they're still generally going to be worth it if you're looking to add a bit more firepower. And plasma guns on infantry squads were already fairly good, now they're very good to be honest. They used to be 7 and now they're 5 points, and they really do provide a decent upgrade on the squad's firepower. Now I have chosen to go for no orders at all on this list at the moment, which is a bit of a weakness, losing things like first rank fire or move. I felt that just more warm bodies might be better. Though you could easily drop an infantry squad to include a couple of platoon commanders, though you might have to sacrifice an astropath due to the slots. In any case, these guys will be providing a little bit more screening for the tanks and trying to nab some midfield objectives while dealing a bit of damage with the plasma weapons, potentially trying to use them to unleash overlapping fields of fire on one key target. Finally, for the heaviest guns of the list, we've got 3 tank commanders, each armed with a battle cannon, las cannon, plasma cannon sponsons, and a heavy stubber. Now these certainly have gone up in points, but they've also got more lethal as well. Gaining blast on the battle cannons and plasma cannons will certainly help them shred infantry units that are 6 or more in size, and also having no penalty to moving and shooting the plasma cannon, las cannon or heavy stubber is really quite a nice asset and will keep them accurate. If we're against armour, then certainly using 2 command points to get a maximum 12 shots out of the Hammer of Sunderance against 1 key target could be very nice indeed. Finally, to provide a little bit of indirect firepower support, we've got 3 Manticores, who have chosen to go for over Basilisks this time, just due to us already having taken the Emperor's Fist tank company rather than the Emperor's Wrath artillery company. Plus they got some slightly better points changes in chapter approved, and the 5-turn game that we have now means that they'll only be out of missiles for 1 turn out of it, if it even matters. We'll be running at 2 as tank aces for the flat 3 damage, 1 in place for the Warlord trait, and 1 brought in with the stratagem. If we do happen to be against hordes, then the blast special rules could make these guys very scary against anti-infantry as well, getting a crazy flat 12 strength 10 shots against any units that are 11 or more in size. In general, the things I worry about most with this list are maybe not quite having enough midfield presence if the Balgrin and infantry are eliminated, and also the way that there's quite a lot of points invested in those tank commanders. They're a pretty hefty 240 points a pop, while they still have some very nice damage output. If your opponent does manage to take out a couple of those in turn 1, then you could be facing a very uphill struggle. Hopefully with the new 9th terrain rules it shouldn't be too hard to get them either obscured behind dense cover or behind obscuring terrain though. Next I thought it would be fun to see what we could do with Foot Guard despite the increase of 4 to 5 point guardsmen. This list still does the horde thing pretty convincingly. We've still got over 230 infantry here, and hopefully at least some armies might struggle to deal with that, particularly if everyone starts gearing towards killing elites and big things, which looks like it might be more of the meta in 9th. The core of the list are 18 infantry squads, again with plasma guns and bolters. We've gone for Kaschans this time, and I have filled this one out to 3 battalions, which does mean that we're going to be a little bit lighter on command points. though to be honest in this one we don't have absolutely tons to spend it on anyway. The infantry squads and their plasma guns will push up into the midfield, hopefully gum up all the objectives for at least a few good turns, and we really shouldn't be finding it too hard to achieve board control secondaries with all of these guys plus move. We've got a decent amount of character support as per normal. We've got 3 company commanders and Ironhand Strachan for a decent amount of orders, 2 Primaris Psychers for a little bit of smite damage, or maybe using things like Psychic Maelstrom to do a bit of psychic sniping, a couple of priests, and of course Strachan's Aura for the extra attacks to get up our Kaschan infantry to a fairly scary 3 strength 4 attacks each, and also Gunnery Sergeant Harker to keep that plasma accurate as we move up and unleash a few rounds with payback. To secure the deployment zone, we've got 3 units of veterans, each armed with a las cannon and 3 sniper rifles. Could be another reasonable area for the Gunnery Sergeant to hang out. They're quite cheap and they don't cost all that much more than standard guardsmen, so should hopefully be able to do some chip damage or at least worry some enemy characters. Finally, we're going to be making some heavy use of strategic reserves in this list, spending a further 2 command points to put a whole load of special weapon and command squads in reserve. Our special weapon squads each have 3 plasma guns in them, so we should be able to have them turn up and provide a pretty hefty punch to an elite enemy infantry unit. And we've got 3 command squads each with 3 melter guns in them. Now with their new lower price tag and strategic reserves, for 170 points we can have 9 very accurate melter shots turn up right beside the enemy. Hopefully that should guarantee the elimination of at least 1 key target. In terms of strengths, as per normal, Foot Guard is going to have some excellent board control, and should particularly punish any enemy light infantry with a decent amount of las fire and strength 4 attacks in combat. In terms of weaknesses, its damage output really isn't all that strong. We really will have to pick and choose the very most important targets to eliminate, and the rest is likely to get away unscathed. Plus with so many 10-man units we are going to be a bit more susceptible to blast rules. In general though, I think it could still be very interesting to run Foot Guard lists, particularly if the meta does establish itself to be taking loads of anti-heavy guns. Perhaps we could see some big board control type lists managing to hoover up some primary objectives. Finally, I thought as Sentinels and Flamers were so improved, I thought it would be interesting to put together a light armour list, where we just try and overload the enemy with cheap effective guard vehicles. For this one we've completely eschewed any infantry whatsoever, which I think is far more viable to do now that we can fire certain weapons in close combat, and in this army we can put 190 wounds of vehicles on the table. I've chosen to go for a custom regiment for this one, and the army is organised in 2 outrider detachments with the traits for jury-rigged repairs, which means they regenerate wounds every turn that a unit's damaged, and also the one to reroll the number of shots coming out of weapons, which will be pretty solid with all the blast weapons and all of the flamers. We've got a pretty hefty screen of vehicles with flamer weapons in this army, a full 9 scout sentinels all armed with heavy flamers, and 3 hellhounds with inferno cannon, heavy flamer, and 2 of them have storm bolters. These guys are mainly just aiming to push up the board, try and secure midfield objectives, and give any enemy infantry in the midfield a good toasting. I certainly wouldn't be shy about charging with any of these units if it could disrupt and distract enemy infantry. If they do fall back, then hopefully they've lost shooting options or psychic options, and if they stay in combat then hopefully you can flame away at them next turn. When moving up, I'd try and give the hellhounds a bit of a wide berth. You can't re-roll the explosions on them anymore, so they're a little bit more of a threat to your army than they were previously, so that would have to be worked around. Behind them as a very durable second layer are 8 armoured sentinels with las cannons, and 1 squad of 3 of them also has 3 hunter killer missiles to use that first strike sentinel stratagem to give them a very powerful alpha strike. Again, these guys would just be mobile, plinking away at enemy armour. They don't have the highest damage output in the world, but again, if it made sense, they wouldn't be against charging into close combat just to annoy enemy units, and if they do remain in combat, then they can at least try and get some shots off with the las cannons as a bit of extra damage. Behind these screens, advancing up, would be 3 tank commanders armed with demolisher cannons. In the initial version of the list I did just write them as standard Lehman Russes, but tank commanders being only 25 points more means they're really quite an easy upgrade to take, and of course it does the good job of filling out our HQ slots. Demolisher cannons hitting on 3s should do some reasonable damage to anything that ventures into the midfield. Finally, at the back we are using 2 basilisks armed with heavy bolter and damage 3 earthshaker cannons, again using 2 tank cases to get them to be damage 3, to hopefully put some extra hurt on any big armoured targets. I think that enemy lists that aren't cut out for dealing with quite so much armour might struggle with this one, particularly if their anti-armour is concentrated in a few units that can be eliminated. One of my bigger concerns is trying to get all of these heavy flamers in range, and if the enemy does play cagey for a turn or 2, then it could make it very hard for us to deal good damage to enemy infantry units, which could give us a bit more of a struggle with trying to get on certain objectives. We also wouldn't be amazingly strong on high terrain boards with this, where infantry could have some decent advantages moving in and through ruins, and we might struggle versus any objective secured units taking objectives until they can be eliminated with flamers. Despite all that, if we can bring the units to bear, then we have some very good offensive firepower, and of course we're really quite hard to take out in terms of defence. So let me know what you're thinking in terms of Imperial Guard army lists in 9th edition. I feel something like the first list is probably going to be the way that competitive guard shakes out a bit for the time being. Some solid midfield infantry, plus decent tank and artillery support as before. There certainly might be a bit more room for things like hellhounds, sentinels and outflanking squads with special weapons though. If you've been list building yourself, it'd be interesting to hear any ideas that people have. I'll certainly enjoy reading over your comments. If you have enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where we'll certainly be keeping the Imperial Guard content coming out very regularly. And if you have enjoyed the video, I'd just like to mention that I do have an Element Games affiliate link which is down in the video description below. If you'd like to help support the channel, that link can be one way to do so, at no extra cost whatsoever if you were thinking about ordering in some Warhammer 40k in the future. Element Games is a discount retailer in the UK, usually giving 10 to 20% discount off 40k models, and if you click the link before making an order, then a small amount of the money goes to Auspex Tactics without costing you any more whatsoever, so it can just be a way to help support the channel if you were thinking about buying something already. I do have a very similar link as well for Amazon in the USA and Canada. Again, if you were thinking about buying something off Amazon, if you click the link first, then a small amount goes to help support the channel, again not costing you any more at all when you buy. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.